How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 4 of What If Deku Was a Phoenix. And now, before we begin, I would just like to tell you all I'm going to be responding to almost every single comment that you all leave down the comment section below in the next couple of days. So if you have any just questions or what suggestions for me, please leave them down in the comment section below. And now, let's begin. Aizawa's attention would turn right on towards the middle of the USJ. Staring on, there he would see a massive purple portal start spewing out villains within groups of 10 as they just kept coming out of this portal, coming and coming and coming, as they would continue just flowing out of this portal like an endless river for just minutes, as finally it would stop with the last villain coming out of the portal, which would end up being a massive bird monster looking thing. As this bird monster would lay at the back of the group, Aizawa would get into a stance before telling 13 to protect the students. 13, protect the students. I'll handle these thugs, Aizawa would say with a cold glare written all over his face. He would jump down before starting his barrage of attacks on all of these unsuspecting villains. Not knowing what his quirk was, they really had nothing to know what he was going to do. So when he would end up coming down, attacking them, they really are just kind of holding back, not sure what he was going to manage on them. This would cause Aizawa to easily take down multiple or many of these villains in just quick succession. However, before anything else could happen, the purple monster-looking thing, or portal-looking thing, villain, whatever you want to call it, would end up just transferring its body up to where all of the students were. "Good morning, Class 1A, he would say in a striking voice. "I've gotten orders to separate you all, so that's exactly what I'm going to do," he would say before throwing all of them into a portal, dropping them scattering throughout the map. So as Izuku would land on the water side of the USJ, falling onto the boat, would land before getting up, rubbing his back in pain. Oh, that landing couldn't have gotten any softer, now could it? He would say before looking in the water, wondering if any other students had fallen into the water. Izuku could be looking around as all of a sudden he would end up seeing Todoroki on just an ice patch in the middle of the water, as Izuku would end up waving over towards Todoroki, who would start to walk over towards where Izuku was. "What's up, Shoto?" Izuku would ask his brother, or his brother would only just shake his head. "This has been such an interesting day, I guess, and it's not even 10 a.m. "So, what's the plan?" Todoroki would ask, staring onto all of the villains surrounding the boat. Suzuki would just shrug his shoulders before saying, "Hey, Todoroki, you think maybe it's possible that you could just freeze the lake?" Izuku would say, pointing downwards. As Todoroki would think for a moment before nodding his head. "Yeah, that actually seems like quite the viable option," he would say, just nodding his head with a smile on his face, before he would end up putting his hand down onto the boat as the ice would spread from the bottom of the hull of the boat outwards and onto the lake, where it would end up just capturing all of the villains there within, just encapsulating them in ice. "Oh, good job, Shoto. So, guess we should probably go off and see what Aizawa was doing now," Zuko would say, jumping down onto the solid ice platform that was beneath them. Zuko would jump down, trying his hardest not to slip, walking over towards where Aizawa happened to be just moments prior. Izuku would be walking down as he would end up seeing Aizawa there, struggling to take down a group of villains, as Izuku would look back towards his brother, before his brother would end up nodding his head. Both of them would stare on towards Aizawa before jumping upwards. Izuku, with his wings held high, would end up throwing multiple feathers down onto the villains, as Todoroki would end up having his hand throwing fire, a ring of fire that would go right around Aizawa. So both of them would end up doing this. Zuko would end up landing right in front of all of the villains that had just fallen. Aizawa would look towards them before telling them to leave, as these villains are quite strong, that they're not going to be able to handle them. Zuko would look towards Aizawa, looking back towards the villains. Aizawa, you do know both me and Todoroki are the children of Endeavor. We've got this. We've been training for stuff like this for years, Zuko would say, holding his stance right in front of a massive army of villains that were before him. Well, I guess I can't really stop you. You're already here, so there's really no going back. So, let's do this, Aizawa would say, so all of them would charge towards the villains, easily taking down them row by row, going forward, taking them down. Just each wave would go quicker than the last. So finally, there would be no villains standing within their way and the last 4 people. As Zuko would look on to see someone hiding beneath a cloak, while there was there's 3, the portal person, a blue-haired person that seemed to have some weird liking towards a bunch of hands, and that bird-looking thing. As soon as Zuko looked at it, it kind of sent shivers down Zuko's spine. Zuko didn't know why, though. It was just strange. It looked so weird. As Zuko would to be staring on towards the blue person as he was in the middle of all of them, he would end up opening his eyes after thinking, Nomu, I guess it's come to this. Kill those 3. I'll give you orders once you kill them, okay? The blue-haired person would say. The Nomu would give off a screech in acceptance of its mission, jumping off, taking on Aizawa, who was in the middle of the 3... in the middle between Shoto and Zuko. Taking Aizawa, you would punch Aizawa's head, punching him right to the staircase, so Aizawa's head would slam back into it, so he would fall down to the ground, his body limp from the attack, so he wasn't prepared for such an attack that was so quick, and just came at him so fast. As Aizawa would be lying on the ground, the Nomu would give off another shriek or screech before looking around, wondering where its next target was, as he would then turn towards Zuko, rushing towards Zuko after Todoroki would jump in his way, slamming his foot on the ground as a massive iceberg would completely encapsulate the Nomu. However, this wouldn't hold long, as the ice would start to shake and rattle, as all of the sudden cracks would start to appear, as these cracks would start to get bigger and bigger, as the cracks would grow and grow, as finally they would grow so large that the iceberg would shatter. As Todoroki seeing this, the Nomu would continue on its trek now on towards Todoroki, rustling and bustling, with there seemed to be no stop, as you couldn't stop a train that was going full speed, so it'd take a while for you to stop it. So with this Nomu rushing on towards Todoroki, there really wasn't much stopping it. So his barrage of fire attacks and fire just currents weren't going to stop Nomu that had just its mind set to take on Todoroki. Rushing towards Todoroki, the Nomu would finally arrive, slamming its fist into the gut of Todoroki. Before Todoroki would be sent flying upwards, the Nomu would grab onto Todoroki's neck, slamming him down into the ground. As Todoroki would hit the ground, he would end up getting up. However, this was a severe mistake, as the Nomu would be there waiting for him, slamming him back down into the ground, which would be the finishing blow, knocking Todoroki out, cleanly unconscious. As we now end up seeing Zuko standing alone against the Nomu, the 2 people that he had been fighting with just moments prior had now just been knocked out by this bird monster-looking thing. Zuko would stare on towards the Nomu, wondering what was going to happen next, as the Nomu would rush towards Ms. Zuko, who would guard himself with his wings. As the Nomu would punch his wings, just with so much force, his wings would start to give way. He had never been punched with such just force and velocity before, as his wings would end up bending inward right onto Izuku. Izuku would feel the full force of the blow being sent flying backwards, right towards Shigaraki. Shigaraki would merely step to the side along with the person in the cloak. Izuku would then be slammed into the fountain. Falling down to the ground, Izuku would get up, holding himself in the puddles, as his wings around him would start to just slowly be just dimmer and dimmer because of the water. His flames really couldn't be extinguished. That's just how just hot and bright they would burn. However, water with that really would dim and weaken those flames. So with the dimming of Izuku's flames meant Izuku was also getting weaker. So with the weaker Izuku, it would be even easier for the Nomu to continue on fighting him, as the Nomu would appear right in front of Izuku right after he would get up, with two fists on either side of Izuku's face, slamming both of those cheeks into either side of Izuku's face, as Izuku would fall down to the ground in pain. On his knees, Izuku would get up, making sure that this couldn't be his last fight. With his dimmer wings still holding out in front of him, the Nomu would give off another screech before racing towards Izuku, punching him right in the throat, caving in his throat, causing Izuku to fall down to the ground, being sent flying backwards once again. As Izuku being sent flying backwards, he would finally end up hitting a wall, falling down to the ground, as his limp body would fall down. Izuku would start choking out, trying to just grasp any sort of oxygen, any air. However, his collapsed airways just couldn't breathe. Izuku would slowly start suffocating before Izuku would end up falling into unconsciousness, as we end up seeing Izuku just sitting within an empty abyss. Izuku would be sitting there as a small orange little bird would end up just hopping right over to Izuku. The bird would look right at Izuku, or would end up jumping right onto Izuku's head. It would stare towards Izuku with its head upside down, looking on towards him. It would give Izuku sort of a perplexing look, wondering what exactly Izuku was doing as of the moment. Izuku would look at the bird as well, just with another confused look towards it. As the bird would end up looking towards it, the bird would all of a sudden peck Izuku right in the top of the forehead, as all of a sudden in the real world, a massive beam of light would streak from out of Izuku's limp body. As this massive light would end up subsiding, as there Izuku's body was missing, and taking its place was a massive, beautiful phoenix staring towards the Nomu. As the phoenix would end up just flapping and fluttering its beautiful lava-like wings, as those wings would end up flapping once again, causing air to be sent flying out, as the hot air would hit the ground, causing an earthquake to start happening. So all of a sudden, volcanoes would start coming out of the ground, spewing lava out of them, as a shriek from the phoenix would be heard going off, as the phoenix would rush towards the Nomu, slicing with its wing, slicing the Nomu's head clean off. As all of this, while Shigaraki was watching very just intently, wondering what this was and if this was a quirk and all, just seemed so powerful. The power to not die, turning into a bird and then creating volcanoes. It all seemed very, very weird to Shigaraki, so he didn't really know why it was doing stuff like this, but he really couldn't control it. As the Nomu would be decapitated, Shigaraki would sense that there really wasn't any winning in this fight, so he would put his head down in shame, knowing that the match was over, and would end up telling Kirigiri to open up the portal as they were going to leave. As the Nomu would have its head sliced clean off, as the slice would end up leaving just bits of lava back as a residue, burning deep into the Nomu, destroying its nerves and regeneration, causing the Nomu to have died there on the spot. After this, however, with there no need to remain in the form, the bird would fall down to the ground before it would end up dissipating, leaving only the body of Izuku behind. As we now end up seeing Bakugo rush in from out of nowhere, looking around, just wondering what had just happened. "Izuku, what the hell happened?" Bakugo would say, lifting up Izuku by his shirt collar. And that is where part 4 of What If Deku Was a Phoenix comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy it, and if you did, please consider subscribing, as it really does help this channel out, and you can even be notified when the other parts of this series do end up coming out. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.